your favorite nurse Doms. Welcome back to Trauma Bond, the podcast where we talk about real life, real trauma, and real healing. Today I want to talk about my experience growing up in foster care. Foster care is something a lot of people hear about, but not really everyone understands what it feels like to be in it. For many kids, it means moving from place to place, learning how to survive in certain environments, and trying to figure out where you belong. For me, foster care wasn't just about changing homes. It shaped the way I saw relationships, trust, and even myself. There were moments of pain, confusion, and loneliness. But those experiences also become part of my story, and they made me who I am today. So let's get right into it. I actually was in foster care from 6 to 8 years old, and then from 12 to 18 years old, but I jumped out of my window of one foster home when I was 14 and I never went back. So we'll start with when I was 6 years old. When I was 6 years old, I remember living with my mom in a motel. I believe my two brothers lived there as well. And one day, I don't even know what I was doing. I think I was sleeping. I remember my brothers had gotten a really, really bad fist fight. There was blood everywhere. So they obviously, my mom and whoever else was there, took me outside. While they were fighting, I guess somebody had called the police. The police ended up taking me into foster care. I remember when I was 6 to 8 years old, I went into about 20 different homes. And the ones that I remember were probably the worst ones. I don't even know if I remember any of the good ones, honestly. But let's start with one of them that I do remember. So I remember living with this family. They were not very nice. I think that they were just doing it for the paycheck, but they often didn't feed me. They didn't, take care of me properly. I think I missed a bunch of days of school as well. I remember when it would be late at night, I would have to go sneak into the kitchen and eat like uncooked hot dogs with cheese in them and, make it so like they wouldn't notice that something was missing. I also remember getting really, really bad lice when I was there. So I'm not sure how, the foster care system found out, but they did take me out of that home. After that, I remember one other home where I stayed with this lady. I think it was just a temporary overnight because they needed somewhere to place me. She was the sweetest human being alive. I don't even think she remembers me. I don't really remember what she looked like or her name, but I do remember she just kind of held me the whole night and while I was, just crying obviously because I was taken away from my mom. And she was a sweet lady. Best foster care experience I've ever had, and it was only a few hours overnight. Another home I remember going to was a home where there was a bunch of little girls there. They did feed me, of course, but they did do a bunch of things that were not good. Like, I remember one day there was a swimming pool outside. I didn't know how to swim yet because, I'm 6. My mom hadn't taught me how to swim yet. So we're all sitting by the pool. I think they're having a barbecue, and the dad picks me up, and I start screaming right away. And he goes to throw me in the pool. So he throws me in the pool. I can't swim. I just remember hearing the mom say, like, "What are you doing?" And he's like, "Well, how old is she supposed to learn?" And then I think one of the foster, like, sisters or brothers jumped in and got me out. Thank goodness. And then after that, I was determined to learn how to swim. So I don't know if it was really, like, a good thing or a bad thing, but I do remember that. I also remember waking up in the middle of the night once to get something to drink in this home, and the older sister was like, you need to go back to your room right now because if he sees you, like, it'll just be bad. Just please go back to your room. And I was like, what are you talking about, But I don't even think I really talked at 6 years old. I'm pretty sure I was like a mute. I remember her, telling me that and then him coming out, like, who's out there? And she's like, oh, like, I'll take care of it. And then I don't know what happened to her, But I only assume now that it seemed real fishy, Like, what is she protecting me from? those were the few that I remember when I was 6 to 8 years old. I do remember that that family as well had taken me to church, I believe, every Sunday. And I don't know what this man, the dad, I don't know what he did to me, but I was pretty traumatized after that, like going into churches, going around churches. But I was also a mute, so I didn't really tell anybody anything. I didn't I didn't get to talk to my family often or anything. So I might have blocked part of that out, but I'm not going to no hypnosis so they can make me relive it or anything. But so those are the families. And then when I was 8 years old, my mom ended up, like doing her rehab facility program, and she went to court. She got me back. I stayed with her in this, program. I think it was called Via Vanta or something. And I stayed with her there for a while until, she got out and got an apartment, which was fine. After that, I lived multiple awful places up until I was like 12, which, from my last episodes, that my mom left me at 12 years old to fend for myself, so I lived on the streets. But there was a time during that where I did, try to go back and live with her, obviously, because, it's hard for a 12-year-old to be homeless. So at that point, they had taken me away again when they realized that, I wasn't living with my mom. I was on the run from foster care already. Well, not foster care, but I was on the run from the system. Like, they were trying to find me to place me in foster care. So I ended up back in foster care. I went to a few homes. Looking back at it now, they weren't so bad, but I guess I felt so unloved there and just kind of like a maid or something that I didn't want to continue living with people who didn't care about me, right? One of my families, I remember, which was my last family, they had other foster children there, and we didn't really get along very well. But they often gave us chores, or like if we didn't eat all of our food, they would say, okay, well, you're going to be scrubbing the counters, scrubbing the floors, doing all this before you go to bed. They also would cook some dinners that I didn't, I wasn't fond of. And I remember my social worker telling me, like, if you need anything, just reach out to me. So I did. I told her, they never take me shopping with them to like pick out food. And she's like, well, they're supposed to because they get that money for you. And once I told her that, she had like a little meeting with the mom, and the mom's like, of course we'll take her with us shopping. She completely lied to them. She didn't ever take me shopping. I also remember one time I had just gotten home from school, and I was in my room. I, took my shoes off by my bed, put my backpack on the bed. I think I had gone to the kitchen to get something to drink, and I come back and my shoes and my backpack are put away. And I went in there and I said, hey, why'd you touch my stuff or whatever, I asked her. And she's like, I just want to make it look like no one lives here. And I was like, well, we do live here. I don't know who you're trying to like hide us from or impress. Like, we live here. This is my stuff. The room is very clean. I don't have anything lying around on the floor. I just got home. I just took my shoes off. I don't see why it's such a big deal for me to leave my shoes on the floor of my own room. So one day I told her, hey, I just finished cleaning my room. I'm going to go take out the trash, and, I'll be back in time for dinner. Just throwing away the trash real quick. So I remember taking 2 duffel bags that she thought was trash, but it was really all my clothes. I took 2 of those and I threw them out my window. And then I had 2 other bags that I pretended were the trash. And I walked right out the back door to where the trash was, grabbed all my stuff, and ran. I ran and I jumped in a car with one of my friends who I knew when I was homeless. And I left foster care. And I never looked back. I remember I would go to Walmarts and stuff sometimes, and I'd see my picture, missing child, And, I would hope nobody would recognize me from that. A lot of these were really hard times. Before I lived with this last family, I was in a group home. A lot of people don't really hear about group homes. When you're in the system, they kind of just think that you're placed with a family, but that's not really true. I was in a couple group homes, but one specifically I remember because it wasn't a these were not bad times in my life. Like, they were I was in like a more stable environment. So looking back at it now, it wasn't awful. But when you're abandoned by your family and you're left in these places, it does feel awful in the moment. So when I lived at this group home, it looked like a little mini prison, right? There's different buildings, and each building has like maybe 8 rooms for different children. And then in the middle, there's another building where it's like the cafeteria where you go eat. Behind that building, there was a few little buildings for like arts and crafts. There was a game room, stuff like that. It sounds real nice. But in these group homes that I would sleep in, there was up to 16 girls in one because we would all each share a room with somebody. And everyone was fighting. It was like an episode of Baddies in those places. Like, all you see is these girls fighting. There's 2 staff members there, damn near our age, who can't keep us from fighting. I'm just like, I don't even want to be here, let alone fight with you guys. And it ranges from, I think it was, what was it? Like 10 to 18 in there. So some were pretty older. I do remember that one girl had a cell phone in there, and I would do some of her chores and she'd let me use her cell phone. I would only be able to call like my brother. He's the only one that would answer me. But I also made really good friends with a few girls there who I don't talk to now. Some of the worst times in those places was like holidays, right? For example, when I was in there, it was Thanksgiving. So everybody's like dressed really nice. They're doing like a feast inside the cafeteria, which was, pretty cool thinking about it now. But I mean, you have children who are taken away from their parents, their family, or whoever. Maybe from a bad situation, yes. Like, I was taken from pretty bad situations both times. But, you're sitting there getting ready to eat. On half of the side of that cafeteria, you see people with their families because they were able to visit on those holidays inside, our common areas. And then you have half of the room with just sad little kids. Nobody comes to visit them. Nobody, knows them. They're just sitting there by themselves eating. And, of course, that was me. I was one of them. So I would look around the room. There'd be some kids crying. I would go talk to them because I was kind of more friendly, a little bit nicer then. And it was really sad, watching these family members come visit their kids, regardless of their situation. It could have been a really bad situation that they were out of, and maybe their parents aren't the best people, but, they visited. From the outside, it just kind of looked like, wow, their parents really care about them. They came here to eat with them, and it was really fucking sad. You're eating this not the best dinner by yourself, watching these other kids be with their moms, their dads, and then you go back to sleep after. And during that time, it was just like prison. You have a curfew, can't get out of your room, can't get out to go to the bathroom. If you did, you'd have to call a staff and they'd, go with you. But either way, it wasn't nice. I can't remember what time the curfew was, but I think it might have been 8 o'clock. I know that every night I would make a cup of tea around like 8:40, and I'd sip on that tea so slowly to go over my time. And I would tell the staff, like, oh, I just want to finish my tea, is that okay? And I would sit there in the living room drinking my tea. And it was like, if I was at peace, but in reality, I'm thinking in my head, wow, I'm stuck here. I'm going to be stuck here forever in this prison with no family. These staff members don't care about us. We don't even care about each other. We're always fighting. And I'm sitting here drinking a tea. And I would feel, it was a mixed emotions, because I would feel at peace and I'd feel sadness, right? But it was the best part of my night. The part that I looked forward to the most, because sleeping was awful. You don't really sleep. You kind of just lay there. You kind of think of all the things you wish you could have in life. And, keep in mind, I'm only when I lived in the group home, I think I was 13. So I was just depressed. Not even going to the activity room during the day, because they were scheduled, I'm sure, just like in jail. They're scheduled that, in the afternoon, you'd go do an hour. You'd have to do classwork, of course, or some type of learning thing. And then you'd have 30 minutes to go play. And I would go play Wii with some of the other girls. And that was nice. Don't get me wrong. But remember, I'm doing all these things as a group activity. I'm not feeling loved as a family. So the more I stayed there, the worse it got for me. I told my social worker, I said, you got to get me out of here. I don't want to be here no more. It's depressing. It's awful. Some of the girls in there are pregnant, about to have a baby. They're crying every night because they know once they have that baby, they're going to be split up, because not a lot of foster families take a mom and a baby. So that was also awful. One of my friends in there was pregnant. That was already tough. And I told my social worker, you got to get me out of here, man. I can't be in here no more. I'm going to leave. They're like, if you leave, I forgot what excuse they said, you're going to go to jail or something. I was like, what? Well, I guess I'm not leaving. And I had never ran away from foster care yet. So I was like, all right, I'll try to stick it out. And she goes, look, I'm working on getting you a family. It's just really hard. There's not a lot of foster families right now. So I was like, no problem. Whatever. I'll stick it out. I remember her telling me, okay, we found you a family. And this is the last family that I went to, that I told you the story. I jumped out of their window. And for a good 2 weeks, I really tried to give these people the benefit of the doubt. And I told myself, look, they don't love you. They might not even like you, but you can do this. You can stay here. You can finish school. You get good grades. And you can get out of here. For a good 2 weeks, I told myself that. And it was really hard. I mean, I felt like Cinderella. It was awful in there. I was cleaning their house for them. And I understand giving kids chores is normal, but I'm scrubbing their kitchen floors, doing all of this every single day at a scheduled time. There was no anything. And then I remember one time I cleaned the kitchen really well. Nothing was on the counters. I did the dishes, put them away. That means I washed and dried them, put them away. And I remember I had went to go fall asleep, and they come in and they say, hey, you didn't clean the kitchen counters right. And I'm like, okay, I cleaned them though. So they bring me down, they show me, you missed a couple spots right here, so now you're grounded. And I'm like, grounded? I don't even go nowhere. I'm not allowed to go over to friends' houses. I'm not allowed to go walk to the store. What are you grounding me from exactly? I guess so. I also had a phone at the time that my mom paid for still. And they were like, we're going to take your phone while you're grounded. I said, the fuck you are? You don't pay for this. This is my phone. I already abide by your rules where I turn it off at 8 o'clock. I'm not giving you my fucking phone. So I made a big deal about it. My social worker ended up coming and saying, look, there's no other families that are going to be able to take you. So you got to listen to their rules. So I said, oh, yeah, no problem. So I give her my phone. I apologize to this mom. I do remember that I did break down to her and I said, there's no love here. It feels awful. And I did this to the foster mom. And I'm crying. And she's like, oh, okay, well, give me your phone. So I think I waited till I got my phone back. I don't remember how many weeks it was. But as soon as I got that phone back, I messaged my friend. I said, come get me. I'm not staying here no more. And this friend was that older lady who I told you about in my last episodes, where I lived with her for a while I was homeless, and, her brother did things to me. That's this friend I called. I called her. I said, I gotta go. You need to come pick me up. She was like, oh, no problem. She's like 28, so she's like, whatever, I'll come get you. She came and got me, and I never looked back. I just stayed on the streets, did whatever I could to get where I needed to be, met who I needed to meet. Yeah, that's my foster experience, and a lot of people don't really understand how it feels to not only go from a broken home, like when I was 6, living in that motel with my mom, but going from home to home where you still feel broken. Because everybody looks at foster care like, oh my gosh, that child had such a bad childhood, and now they're going into foster care. That's really good for them. They're going to be safe in there. They're going to be happy in there, hopefully. It's not like that at all. At least for me, it wasn't. I'm sure there's some good foster people that I wish I could have gotten when I was younger. But to me, I got the ones who didn't feed me, who abused me, who just kind of treated me like I was nobody, which, looking at it now, the treating me like I was nobody was way better than the life that I lived. But definitely the abuse and the neglect was not good. Having to sneak food as a 6-year-old is crazy to me. And it wasn't because I wouldn't eat their dinners or whatever the case that, you can think of or question. They simply just didn't want to feed me. And they got money to feed me. Every single foster parent gets a check that's designated just for, food. They also get their own payment. So they got the means to feed me. They just didn't. And some of them, would hit me, whatever it was, and I never told anybody. I never told my social worker. What 6-year-old openly says, like, hey, they're not feeding me? You don't know if they're going to leave you there, and now you just snitched on them, right? I didn't tell my social worker anything at 6 years old. I didn't talk at all. I think that I was so quiet for so long, young, because I was scared of the outcome, which, probably is from my prior, growing up with my mom in druggy motels and, watching her do drugs. But yeah, I wish the foster care system did a little bit better, choosing the people who raise these children or are in a part of these children's lives, because most of the ones I was in was all temporary. No one really was a foster parent who was willing to keep me besides my last home, and I still left. But if I could go back, I'd probably tell my social worker everything. I don't know how good that would have been for me, or if it would have made a difference. Sometimes I even wish I would have stayed in that last home. Just, played Cinderella part and just kind of, continue to do good in school and graduate and then be out of there. But I did see the other girl in that home who was much older than me. I think she was already almost 18. I did see her bond with the parents, and it was like if it was their daughter. They always talked to her. She was always with them. I remember when she was, very close to turning 18, they were like, we're going to adopt you. And I remember her seeing her crying, tears of happiness. And then there was me, 14 years old or 13, just being their maid, no love, no happiness, no comfort. And I'm like, what's wrong with me? Why don't I get that same treatment? So it was really weird seeing the different bonds that people had with each other too. And, I don't blame them. Maybe I wasn't the easiest kid to break down their walls and talk to, right? But I was abused. I was neglected with my mom. How easy can it be to take care of a kid who's already going through something themselves, which normally every kid in foster care is, right? Like they've all come from something. I don't know if this girl was just different. I don't really remember how long they had her either. They could have had her as a baby. I have no idea. But that really struck me too. I was like, I really got to get out of here. Like, this is just, I hate this whole everything. Another thing from my foster care experience that I do remember is going to court. They picked me up every, I don't remember what it was, a couple months. And you had like a little kid trial. It was so weird. I would get picked up by a van. They would take me to the court building. I'd be sitting in a lounge with a bunch of different children. And they served lunch there. They had a playground there. Every single time you went, they gave you a teddy bear. I don't know how many damn teddy bears I had from this place, but I had a gang. And it was like the worst part. It kind of felt like a stab to the chest every time I got a teddy bear. Like, yep, you're still here. So I remember one day when I was older and I went to court, which was in this last house that I was in. I got picked up and went to court. I waited forever there, and I get into the courtroom, and the judge is talking. You have a lawyer, a little kid lawyer, and I remember them talking about me, and they're like, well, where is she going to go? Blah, blah, blah. Does she have any family? They're like, no family on record. I'm like, nope, that's not true. I have brothers and sisters. They're like, look, little girl, you can't talk during court. If you needed to say anything to your lawyer, you're supposed to say it before. I'm like, I don't even know what a lawyer is. Like, I'm 14. I don't know what none of this is. How are you going to talk about me when I'm right here and I can't talk? So it was very confusing for me. But I did tell them, like, I have a brother. And he goes, okay, well, let's try to call your brother. My brother did try to get me, but he was in another state, so they didn't go for it. But that last court date was super hard because I just kept wanting to say things for myself, and they wouldn't let me. And I even remember the guy saying, like, if you keep talking, you're going to be removed. And I'm like, removed? Like, this isn't Jerry Springer. Like, I'm not going nuts. I'm trying to tell you I do have family. I don't know why you guys don't know I have family. You guys took me away. You should know everything. You should know who my mom is. You should know who my dad is. But they didn't. They didn't talk about any of that. Well, of course they knew who my mom was, but they didn't talk about like my grandma. Or maybe they did contact my grandma. Maybe she said, fuck that little girl, I don't want her. But, well, I'm pretty sure she did. But yeah, children's court is so weird, and it's so, everything about living in the foster care system is just so sad. Like, you go through these things not even fully knowing what you're doing, where you're going. You're placed in strangers' homes who you're supposed to feel safe with. You're supposed to be able to express yourself, talk. They don't even buy you clothes, yet they get a check. I remember one of my families used to get money to take me shopping every month, and they would pick out my clothes for me. I'm already like 12. It was weird, you know? Like, I think I can maybe even just help pick out my own clothes. No. So I dressed in whatever they would dress me. And I know a lot of this sounds like, wow, that's nothing. You could get through that. Like, they're just clothes. But remember, these kids are already drained, right? They're taken away from their family. And it might not have been a good situation. Maybe, I don't know, like their mom killed their dad and they got taken away. Who knows? But these kids are drained. And then now you're treating them like Cinderella. You're treating them like a number at court. It's just the things that you had to go through in there seem so, what's the word? Robotic. Nothing was natural. Nothing was normal. Even when I went to some places, some houses, and I stayed temporarily, they kept all of the razors locked up. I'm like, I know that some of us self-harmed ourselves, but like I'm really just trying to shave my legs. You can't even have that. How do you take a kid away from their family, good or bad situation, place them in these other places where they feel completely alone. You're taking away their simple things and freedom, which you can now provide for them, right? My mom didn't go buy me razors. She didn't, buy me things. And now I'm in a place where you're able to buy me things, yet now it's got to be locked up. I don't know how that's supposed to help you become a normal human, right? Like these places, if they're so good, they're so structured already. You have a mom, you have a dad, or you have a mom, whatever. You have money for food, you have all this. Why can't we be treated normal? Like a normal kid. Like, oh, don't worry, honey. Like, I'll teach you how to shave your legs. If we didn't get that in our natural, normal home with our parents, why can't you teach us that? I think that's what's wrong with the foster care system is they make it so organized like a jail where we don't end up coming out normal. We feel worse in there than we did when we were being abused and neglected. And it's not just that everything is terrible in there, but imagine you're coming from such a terrible situation, put into a home, now you can't shave your legs. They got to keep your razors up. They got to watch you shower. It's weird to me. It shouldn't be that way. I feel so bad for so many children in the foster care system right now because I just know how they're feeling. And I couldn't imagine that. And I wish one day I could become a foster care mom because I think I'd be the perfect foster mom. I think I would give kids so much comfort and make them just feel loved in the small ways. Like, do you want to watch a movie tonight, honey? Anything. None of my families ever did anything like that. There was no game nights. There was no let's watch a movie together. You were strictly their roommate. You did your chores. You ate dinner. You went to bed. They barely talked to you. They didn't wake up, say good morning, like, are you hungry? Never. Never. I was strictly a paycheck to them. And it's really sad, like, when you're being dropped off to school in the morning, you want like have a great day. They're like, bye. See you when you get home so you can clean our kitchen. It was definitely one of the better times in my life living in foster care, but also one of the worst times, if that makes sense. Like, I've obviously been through worse, but being in this situation also did not feel good. So if you're listening to this and you've ever been in foster care and experienced these things, I'm so sorry for you. I hear you. I see you. And you're not alone in still feeling some type of sadness for having to go through that. And if you are in foster care still and you're hearing this, maybe you're even 17 years old, just keep doing it. You're almost out of there. You're going to be just fine. Get those good grades, graduate, and move on with your life because we're not kids forever. I just know that there's so many bad places and people in foster care that I don't really have much hope that they're all good or that all kids are good right now because I just know that there's so many terrible homes out there, and I wish the foster care system would hear this and fix themselves a little bit. Even get better social workers who showed up every 2 days. Like, why can't we pay these social workers to do that? They're showing up every month. That's not enough. A lot can happen in a month. A lot can happen in a week. I think that that's what needs to happen. So if you're related, I'm so sorry for you, but you're going to make it. Or maybe you did make it, like I did. We all become something. It doesn't define us that we lived in there. Well, I hope you enjoyed this episode. And remember, I'll be having another episode next week. I don't know if I'm going to be doing them every Sunday, but it'll definitely be a day in the week. I will be posting on my Instagram and my other social medias with the date of my next episode. So if you have any suggestions, please let me know. Comment on the video or comment on the posts when I post them. And I will be seeing you next week. Bye.